Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by both co-hosts. I'm joined by Greg Zumach and Bryan Smith. Boys, we're back. It is our second annual, right? Second annual? Yeah, second annual award show to recap the now 2024 completed minor league baseball season for the Chicago Cubs. Zumach, I'll kick it to you first. How you feeling coming into the show? This honestly, probably extra long show. We counted for it to be an extra long show. I'm sure it will be.
I mean, I'm feeling good. It is really interesting, and I mean, we'll go through some of this, but I think it didn't really hit me until today when I was kind of preparing, and a little bit over the weekend when I was kind of jotting some names down for these awards of oh yeah, it is over. This is it doesn't really settle in because you kind of watch a lot of games and it feels like a normal Monday to
Yeah.
have off, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh damn, it's gone. So I've missed it, or I'll miss it, and looking forward to next year.
And we've gotten used to the last couple of years. A Cubs affiliate has won the championship, and this year the Smokies were the only team that made the playoffs, and they were over. That season was over after 3 playoff games, so it was just sort of kind of ended with a whimper a little bit, which has not been the case.
Yeah, it did feel pretty abrupt this year. I don't know if I think it also has felt this way even with the championships in past years where it's like, you know what honestly might be contributing a little bit to it is that the Arizona Fall League names haven't been announced. Honestly, I'm like, oh, like now I'm on to the Arizona Fall League and we don't have players to talk about that we know are going to be in the Arizona Fall League. And it's like I don't have that next thing to look forward to, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, am I wrong? But normally it would be out by now, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
100%.
Okay, that's what I thought. And we've got some names that have trickled in, and I think each of us maybe heard a few people we think. But yeah, I normally it's announced by now. You're right. Yeah, it feels late.
Yeah, for sure. Bryan, I'll kick it to you. Like before we get in, we have I believe 20 total awards that we'll get into for the show. But I think that Zumach and I did a little bit of this last week, right? Is that or a couple weeks ago? Whenever it was, when we were talking about the Myrtle Beach and the South Bend seasons. But I guess Bryan, what's your kind of takeaway from this Cubs minor league season throughout the entire system?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is that the 6 hitters at the top of the system, all sort of answered the bell and everyone performed admirably. And, I think the most important thing for a farm system being successful in a year is your top guys doing well. And, besides Cade Horton's slightly disappointing, just, season only because of injury, everything else at the top went really well. And then I thought the first half of the season, it kind of dragged a little bit where we didn't have great breakout prospects, which is an award we'll get to and maybe talk about a little more. But I thought the second half had a little more sort of excitement with newer names coming up and popping a little bit. So overall, I think it was a good season for the system, but really highlighted by those stud 6 hitters.
Yeah, Zumach. I mean, that's pretty important. I feel like to have those top guys really show out. But we talked about it quite a bit, and the South Bend Cubs, especially, their rotation was something to watch at the end of the year. The Myrtle Beach hitters were something to watch at the end of the year. But I don't know. There was it was a kind of a tale of two halves in terms of the season in the Cubs minor leagues.
It was, and I think this season feels so long, but it's hard to remember that at the beginning of the year we were still having PCA watch. That's how long this season was. We were having Cade Horton watch, and in many ways, when those two stopped being meaningful contributors to the minor league side, because obviously PCA was in the majors and Cade kind of dealt with injuries, the entire focus shifted away from what had been the top 2 prospects. And I think we could still argue Cade is there or whatever, that's not getting into that, but the focus of what everybody was looking at, which is very much driven by when is PCA going to be up, when is Cade Horton going to be up, it feels like a lifetime ago, it's just a few months, shifted completely towards different players. We saw kind of sporadic breakouts. And in many ways, we saw an organization that shifted its emphasis, I don't want to say, but like something like that, like what it's known for. You know, a few years ago, we were talking about a system that was just so deep, like, oh my gosh, it was so deep, lacked kind of the guys at the top. And then this time, you know, there are still some guys obviously deeper to follow. We wouldn't be doing a show if we couldn't dive into them. But it's very much driven by the guys at the top. So it's just like the narratives around the Cubs minor league team just dramatically changed from a few months ago.
Yeah, I feel like if you were to follow the system pretty closely all the way through the end of last season and then take a break and be like, I'm not really going to pay attention to the Cubs minor league system this year in 2024, and then you picked up the stat sheet and the prospect rankings and the organizational depth chart and all that good stuff starting right now, you'd be in shock in terms of like what it just looks so different in terms of the depth, like that you mentioned, Zumach, right? Like going from a very deep system of the 12 guys that were like top 150 type prospects in all of baseball. So what we have now, not having that depth, losing in terms of like the prospect status, you lose Pete Crow Armstrong, you lose Ben Brown, you lose Jordan Wicks, you lose Michael Bush. There's guys that you lost in terms of prospects, and then you got guys that you had never heard about a year ago. The Arianes Ramon, the Jose Escobars, like those guys that like I hadn't even dug into at all this time last year. And so like there's a big change in what the system looks like now compared to even a year ago, which is like that feels huge, right, Bryan?
I think I both agree with you and I don't agree with you, because I think if you looked at the top 10 prospects, you'd be like, wow, nothing changed in a lot of
That's a
ways,
good point.
you know, and that's what's interesting. You know, I think, you know, we see so much more of those 20th through 40th prospects than most people pay attention to. But, you know, James Triantos hit 300 and and Kevin Alcantara started slow and then was awesome in the summer. Like some things would just never change.
Owen Caissie cut down the strikeout rate after April, right? Like
Exactly.
Brad posted a great tweet earlier today where he was looking at the last 3 years from Owen Caissie, his strikeout rate after April, or like up through April, and then his strikeout rate from after April on, right, from May on, and just crazy differences every single year. Yeah, it's things that have happened for each of these top type of prospects. Matt Shaw hit like we thought he would hit, you know, like we saw all those things. So all right, let's go ahead and start digging, because like I said, we have 20 awards to get to, everything from hitter of the year. We have a couple fun ones here in the middle, and then we have some superlatives towards the end of this thing, handing out some things like the best fastball and the most power and best field to hit and stuff like that. So I think that instead of delaying the main award here, instead of putting that at the very end, we're going to start with it up at the top, and we're just going to dig right into Cubs minor league hitter of the year. And I'll bounce back and forth on who I kick it off with as we move along on the show. Bryan, I'll start off with you this time. Who is your Cubs minor league hitter of the year?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Matt Shaw. Although I think it is pretty close. I think Matt did a lot in the last sort of 2.5 weeks of the season to lock it up for me after it sort of started to look like maybe someone else would take it. But yeah, I mean, one of the stories across minor league baseball this year was how pitcher heavy AA was playing this year, especially the Southern League where the Tennessee Smokies are. And Shaw came out of the gates, you know, I mean, I want to say he was cold for maybe like 5 games, and then he was the best hitter in the league seemingly for a while. The league adjusted to him a little bit, and then he adjusted back and played really well to the end there. I think the thing about Matt is that what jumped out this year was he just does everything as a hitter. Like, he covers all the bases. He's an amazing hitter at hitting to right field that we've talked about a bunch. But then as the year went on, he started to add power to left field. He hits pretty much every pitch type really well. Doesn't strike out a ton, still got to 20 home runs, just about as impressive a well-rounded offensive season as anyone had. He's my pick.
I think that's fair. Zumach, who you got?
So, maybe the numbers won't look quite as impressive, and I don't know if anybody else is going to pick him. I think Shaw is a very respectable pick. There's really a few guys you could pick. I'm going to go with Moises Ballesteros, though. And the reason for that is that over the course of the last few weeks, the stats don't jump out maybe at AAA, but as a true 20-year-old, facing pitchers that are sometimes 15 years older, right? Like, I mean, just enormously different levels of experience, to be able to hang right about like league average there after what he did in AA was immensely impressive. And additionally, I'll share this. I won't obviously share who the team was that was talking about that, but sometimes I like to talk to people that are internal, but sometimes I like to talk to folks that have just faced these guys. And so there was an opposing team that described him as one of the most challenging at bats of the entire season for them. And they're like, I got him, but it was a very difficult at bat kind of a thing. And so that was like a name that they reached out. And I thought that was just a really, really cool thing. I'm going to go with Moises. I think his future is very high. I know he still has some answers on the defensive side, but I think he is just such a professional hitter, and I can't wait to see what he does.
It kind of is surprising, not surprising. It's kind of weird how similar Moises Ballesteros and Matt Shaw are in terms of like the numbers they put up this year, and really kind of in terms of like the way that they hit, right? Like we talk about Moises Ballesteros and Matt Shaw being guys that kind of limit the strikeouts. Moises didn't draw as many walks this year as we were accustomed to seeing, but like still a guy that can work in at bat. Their slash line was super similar. They were off by a few points in terms of batting average, about 20 points in terms of OBP, and about 15 points on slug. Like very similar seasons this year statistically, and the way they went about doing it. My pick for hitter of the year is also Moises Ballesteros. I was between these two guys. Ballesteros and Shaw are my two guys that I was choosing between. I think that Shaw really put up better numbers over the course of this season, but I was talking with Brian before we hopped on and started recording, and I was like deciding between who I was going with here, and he was like, just go with the guy that led in bash. And sure enough, Moises Ballesteros bashed 133 this year, Matt Shaw at 129. So Ballesteros led the system in bash, given his plate appearances. Cam Smith was otherworldly in his 134 plate appearances, obviously, but Moises Ballesteros gets my vote. I think you're right, Zumach. I think him doing it at age 20, absolutely tearing up AA Tennessee in a league that was very difficult to hit in this year. Coming up to Iowa and going through stretches where he looked really strong in Iowa too. He went through some down stretches for the first time in his career, really, but was also strong over the course of the season during his time in AAA Iowa. So Moises Ballesteros is my pick here, but Matt Shaw is not too far behind. I do want to point out one guy that didn't get a vote here from any of us. Johnny Long had an incredible year. Johnny Long actually led the system in OPS plus this season.
He's coming up for me in a later category, so
okay.
we'll be talking about him.
We'll talk about him for sure. That sounds good. But anything else you guys wanted to add as far as Moises Ballesteros or Matt Shaw, the guys who took the award as far as we're concerned?
I mean, I will say I'm slightly colored by the fact that this is a prospect pod, and I'm giving a little bit more weight to who I think is a slightly better prospect. But it's the Cubs needed some of their top guys to really perform, and they did. And so, it's fun to be able to have a few guys here where there's not an obvious like, well, it's got to be this guy because the other guys didn't measure up. There were really some good options here, which is always nice. I think the next category may be a little bit different in the sense that there may be some consistency and not like necessarily in a negative way, but I'm curious to see where this one goes.
Yeah, so hitter of the year, I think that multiple people like went out and like really earned it. Like they I think those three guys that we just mentioned all like really earned the hitter of the year award. Transitioning to starting pitcher of the year, I think that nobody like really went out and like took it and said this is mine. I think that we're going to be pretty consistent with our pick here, but I think that there wasn't a group of guys that were like, hey, like I clearly performed the best in the entire system this year. I went out and earned it. I guess Zumach, I'll start off with you on this one because I know what Brian's answer is here, and it's the same as mine. But who do you have for starting pitcher of the year?
I mean, I think it's the future obvious shirt winner of your dreams. I think it is Brandon Birdsell. I think that his stuff, like just jumped. I'm not saying that he's a future ace. I don't like it when people kind of make these kind of wide assumptions or projections or something like that. But just he really wasn't. He was more on the cusp entering the year. It was a guy that I thought was somebody that was probably more of a, hey, I like him starting, but I think he's going to play up in the pen. Like that's where his future role is. And I mean, I think I said as much in my preseason projections. Over the course of the year, this stuff started to tick up, and it wasn't just one pitch that was leading it. Everything looked crisper. He really, there was a scout that had seen him when he was at Texas Tech that had kind of reached out and was like, this is what he looked like then. Like, this is the kind of caliber of guy. And I think what we saw on the field matched that. There were a couple other people I considered, but there wasn't really any strong consideration. I think it was Brandon Birdsell from the start for me.
Yeah, I'll hop in here and say that my pick is also Brandon Birdsell for starting pitcher of the year. He was the guy that to me just kind of caught my eye the most, and the stats obviously back it up. But I was just always in tune with what Brandon Birdsell was doing every single outing, and like I said, the numbers. I mean, he led the system in innings pitched, which is not always the case with a guy that's a prospect, right? Like a lot of times with starting pitchers, you see the minor league free agent signing or whoever that's playing in Iowa the entire year long, leading the system in innings. Brandon Birdsell led the system in innings with 135.2 this year. His ERA was 3.91, which like doesn't stand out, but kind of everything else was pretty impressive. The strikeout rate was better this year. The walk rate stayed super, super low like we had hoped. He was just really good across the board. And like the thing that stands out, like you said, Zumach, is like that the stuff was significantly better than it was last year. Like significantly better. The fastball was better. The slider was better. He really just leaned on those two pitches hard and threw. But like he leaned on the slider, but like he manipulated it quite a bit. Like we talked on the show about like how the fastball was kind of a little bit of cut righty to it a little bit. The slider had different forms where there's a true cutter, there's a slider. It kind of morphed into a curveball every once in a while, but like he was doing it all intentionally, right? You see some concerns about those, like the curveball and the slider morphing into each other, but he was more like he was manipulating the ball in the way that he wanted to, based on a lefty batter versus a righty batter versus a different count versus he's looking to get a swing and miss pitch versus a ground ball pitch. Like he manipulated the ball really, really well this year, and I like Brandon Birdsell a lot. That's why he's my starting pitcher of the year. Brian, are you in agreement?
I am in agreement. I'm giving it to Birdsell, but I guess I will chat instead about the guy who I think if we'd done these awards on August 1st, Connor Noland is like the breakaway winner. I think Birdsell sort of came up and caught Connor in the last, call it 8 starts. I think Birdsell had, he had a 3.43 ERA down the end of the season, but he was even better than that. If you look at, FIP and things like that, he's starting uptick in strikeouts in AAA, and Nolan fell off a little bit. But the first 3-4 months, I mean, Connor Nolan's breakout was awesome. And it was so cool because he was, the weakness last year was not a lot of strikeouts. And when he went from AA to AAA, he started striking people out like crazy. And just to see the fact that, okay, this guy's now in AAA and he's getting, 5 to 9 strikeouts every game. It was not something I saw coming, and it was a good surprise. His slider, I think, is sort of better than any of us gave it credit for at the beginning of the year. And so Connor had an awesome season. It is actually like really close to me between those two, but I think Birdsell's end of the year just wins it for me.
I mean, those two had pretty similar numbers across the board. If you look at, those were the top 2 guys in innings pitched this year. Connor Nolan finished second. He finished an inning and 2/3 behind Brandon Birdsell.
Yeah.
The ERA was similar. The strikeouts weren't too far off. The whip was pretty similar. Like just good, solid numbers across the board. I want to throw one more name in the mix here as a guy I considered for this. And that's Sam Armstrong, who ended the year in AA.
He'd be third too.
Yeah, I think that he gets my third place vote. He maybe gets my second place vote. I'd argue that he might be the second best performer in the system this year in terms of pitching. Again, logged a whole lot of innings. He was in South Bend in Tennessee. He really performed well during his time in South Bend, and then got the call up to Tennessee. Came back down to earth a little bit, but still finished the year with a 2.87 ERA. he was really strong over the course of the season was Sam Armstrong.
Another late in the draft find. I mean, really, that's going to be if the Cubs want to have a lot of success. They can't just be hitting on top 2-round guys. It is great to hit on top 2-round guys, but you really need to have the depth. You need to have guys like, I mean, he's not in the organization anymore, but like Ty Johnson, went on a heck of a run too. And so certainly like he would be the kind of guy that we would also be talking about here. So, you gotta have your Sam Armstrongs and Ty Johnsons and, see who else you can find.
Man, I would have loved to give this award to Ty Johnson.
Oh, I know it.
Oh, well. All right, let's go ahead and go to relief pitcher of the year. We'll transition there, which was kind of an interesting category this year. Brian, I'll kick it to you first on before we get into this. I guess we're coming off last year where I actually wrote down on a note sheet the awards that we handed out last year, and now it's sitting downstairs in my dining room and not here at my desk as I'm recording this. But I was going to reference some of those. Last year we had the reliever of the year category was interesting because we had Luke Little, we had Daniel Palencia. Those guys were kind of transitioning into the bullpen. And I think that there were a lot more like well-known names across the board for relievers. This year, there's far fewer recognizable names in the reliever category. But Brian, you have a name that might be familiar to us on the show?
I think so. Certainly a name that Greg Huss has said many times. It's Frankie Scalzo Jr. for me. Frankie's season was sort of front-loaded a little bit in terms of success. He was just absolutely incredible at the start of the year. His first 22 appearances of the season contained 0 earned runs, only actually 1 unearned run, which might even be more impressive. So his entire stint in AA this year was an ERA of 0. And that came at a time where, that Tennessee team wasn't great early on. And I think, him and Blake Whitney at the back of that bullpen did a ton to sort of stabilize that team, help make sure they won games, led to them being one of the best teams in the Southern League this year. He went to Iowa, struggled right away, but then really found his footing again the last 5-6 weeks. Just an awesome year for Frankie. I think left no doubt that he should start next year in AAA again, which puts the majors like on the map for him in 2025. So he's my pick.
It feels like Frankie keeps going to a new level, kind of proving that he should be there, and then kind of I don't know how to explain. I think that he proves that he should be there. He might struggle a little bit, and then he's like, oh, like I can actually perform. Like convinces himself that he can perform at that level. Like we saw that with Iowa hard, right? And that like he came up and he's like, oh, like I don't know if I'm up to this challenge, and then he really started to figure it out at the tail end of this year. Zumach, who you got for reliever of the year?
This is something I considered a few different names. I don't know if you're gonna toss out this one. I will say if I had seen him for a longer period of time, I was probably going to go with Jack Neely. When I saw him in Omaha, it was extremely impressive. It was soon after the Cubs had acquired him. He looked very, very good. I don't know if I really want to give somebody the award for, basically what ended up being for a couple weeks. And so the guy I did go with just put up just nutty numbers. And that's Nico Zeglin. I mean, just like the ERA that was sub 1.5 was already kind of crazy. And yeah, he's a little bit older and I totally get that. But then he moved up a level and had like 0.4 ERA or something crazy. I mean, like that's just it just like craziness to the point that I couldn't discount it. I still don't know what it looks like at AA and above, but I think you've got to figure it out because it is, he is commanding the opportunity.
Yeah, he's my pick too. Nico Zeglin is my pick for reliever of the year, relief pitcher of the year. I think that I don't know what he, like you said, I don't know what he is as a prospect. I don't know where I'd rank him on a prospect list, but I do know that the numbers he put up were ridiculous. It's cheating, I guess, a little bit. Like he ended up throwing 66 innings in not that many outings, right? 25 outings. So he was really like a multi-inning reliever and almost like a starter's workload to a certain degree. But yeah, 0.95 ERA over the course of this year between Myrtle Beach and South Bend. was piling up strikeouts, was just really effective and like efficient. He was super efficient on the mound every time he took the mound. So I know that he's got a whole lot of believers in Myrtle Beach and in South Bend and how he performed there. Likely starts next year in Double A or Double A Knoxville. He'll start next year in Double A Knoxville. I'm gonna have to get used to stay in Knoxville right away instead of Tennessee. But yeah, Nico Zeglin's my pick as well. I just think that the numbers are too crazy to look past, especially for this award.
He wasn't my pick for reliever of the year, but I think if we just had a category that was just pitcher of the year, I think he would be my guy.
That's fair. All right. Any other names you guys want to toss out there as far as relievers go?
No.
Right. No. Let's transition into the next award that we're handing out, which is Breakout Player of the Year. I think there's a lot of different choices here for this award. Zumach, we'll lead off with you on this one.
So I mean, this may be a bit of a cop out, but this is a guy that I've already talked about him. I had him ranked much lower. He just kept opening my eyes. Just the command of his arsenal was just so impressive down the stretch. It's Brandon Birdsell. That I mean, from where he went from an evaluation perspective to where he finished it with it for me as an evaluation perspective is just so different. And I just Brandon Birdsell is my breakout player of the year.
I think he transitioned from a guy that was like organizational depth to major league depth, and that is a huge bump. Like that's a huge bump over the course of one season.
Yeah, I had him as about an organizational 6 starter, which for anybody who latches onto this stuff, that's not a bad outcome. That is not a bad thing. That is a major league player. That is a guy that is consistently up and down, that has many seasons in the majors. But like that's until he took a development step. He was an organizational 6 starter, somebody kind of on the periphery, or kind of a middle reliever. That's like the line for me there. And could do both. And I thought maybe he can play up in the pen. And it's jumped about a notch or two. Just again, like it's the command of the arsenal, kind of like what you were talking about earlier, Greg. It's manipulating shape, it's executing versus just throwing with good stuff. There are some other guys in the system that throw with good stuff, but it's very different to have true command of an arsenal.
Brian, who you got for breakout player of the year?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Jonathan Long, who we briefly mentioned as a finalist for hitter of the year earlier. Admittedly, when the Cubs drafted Jonathan Long, I was not sold on that pick at all. I liked 18th rounder Brian Kalmer better. I liked them better as well. Like down the stretch last year when both guys were doing well, I thought Kalmer's looked repeatable and Long's would struggle as he went up the ladder. Sort of the opposite thing happened this year. Kalmer really struggled in South Bend, and Johnny Long, he did well at South Bend. Then he gets promoted to Tennessee where nobody was hitting the baseball, and he hit 340, 455 on base, 528 slugging down the end of the season, was clearly their best hitter in the last 2 months. And I mean, he was the type of guy where every single game that you looked at the box score, he had 2 hits. Like it wasn't like, he was dropping 5 for 5s once a week, but going 0 for 2 other times. I mean, he just every single game was contributing, didn't strike out a ton in Tennessee, goes the other way. I think the guys at The Athletic wrote about him a couple weeks ago and said that statistically he measures as the 90th percentile for bat speed, which is not something that I saw on tape. And so altogether, like, you have a guy that I didn't really think of as a serious prospect in the system. I thought a guy that would almost undoubtedly struggle when he got to the top is now a guy that is probably a top 20 prospect in the system. And, if he hits again next year, then he starts to ask like real questions of the organization that I don't think, this is a guy that struggled his first 2 years of college a good bit too. So just a cool story.
And he's a guy that very well could start off next year. It makes a ton of sense starting off next year in Iowa.
Yeah, it could. Yeah.
All right. Those 2 guys, Johnny Long and Brandon Birdsell, were my probably second and third in the running for my pick for breakout player of the year. My pick, though, is Alfonso Rosario. I think that the way that he kind of took off in the way that prospect nerds had really hoped for was impressive, right? Showing off just crazy amounts of power. Like the power is very clearly there. showing off a good amount of speed, both on the bases and in the outfield, showing off the arm. The routes and defense in center field are not my favorite in the entire role, but that's fine. I think he profiles as a right fielder anyways. But just really the way that Alfonso Rosario took off in the way that we had hoped, that I had hoped, and really put on the major league fans. Like I think that he might be a recognizable name more for fans that pay less attention to prospects. That's fun. That's fun. I think that I had hoped I had put him as like a lesser version of like Zaire Hope this time last year, right? I think that Zaire Hope was, I don't know if it was me and a couple other of you, or like both of you guys, or just me, or who it was last year. But I know that Zaire Hope was on our list of most excited to watch in 2024 before he obviously got traded to the Dodgers. Alfonso Rosario just seemed like a lesser version of Zaire Hope, and really he proved this year that like he deserves to be in that category of young guys that really took off in the lower levels of the minors.
His most impressive stat to me is 109 games played. I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like, it's a 20-year-old guy who lasted the entire season in Myrtle Beach and never really had a prolonged, really nasty slump. He belonged, and you don't see that often for a 20-year-old. And he was just 456 plate appearances. That's great.
Yeah, I'll take a 425 slug and a 770 OPS from a 19, 20-year-old guy in Myrtle Beach. I'll take that every day of the week.
Yep.
Any other names worth pointing out in this category for breakout player of the year? Okay. Let's go ahead and transition to another player of the year, that is comeback player of the year, which I think we have some fun names. Like, this is a fun category to talk about because it's so positive, right? A lot of these guys we talked about, like, oh, like down year last year, coming back from injuries or whatever it might be. Get to brag on guys a little bit more. Zumach, who do you got for comeback player of the year?
So I went through a few different iterations on this. I was thinking guy who came back from injury, and I mean, with how prevalent some like injury seasons are, in baseball, I don't know if I want to go around with this one. But I went with a guy who I personally feel like evaluations, especially at the national level, were way too quick to like jump on board with hype, at completely the detriment of this player. In no way, shape, or form do I think that any minor league player, let alone somebody who had not gotten past the DSL, or even this is when they signed, should be getting A-Rod comparisons. I think that is completely irresponsible, Baseball America, who I respect, but come on, what is that? Christian Hernandez, right? Like, I led that in way longer than I needed to, but like Christian Hernandez was getting crazy hype, crazy comps, and he didn't have a great like first full season in affiliated ball, to the point that there were many people that were asking the question of, was this just kind of an international flop? They happen. And he went out, and well, he didn't have like a Luciano type breakout. He was really, really good. He improved significant areas of his game that ultimately, especially from the contact perspective, posed some very real questions on if he would even have success at the AA level eventually. He answered a lot of those questions while still being a 20-year-old shortstop, in affiliated ball, looking pretty good in a difficult league. I have to go Christian Hernandez here, and I'm curious where everybody else goes, but I was just extremely impressed. I was just extremely impressed with his whole season.
Yeah, I'll hop in there now because Christian Hernandez is also my comeback player of the year, and I think that Brian, you might have him later on for a different award. So I'll talk about Christian here. I think that's honestly, like, this award is both for him in terms of how he performed statistically last year compared to statistically this year. Also, how he looked on the field performing last year compared to this year, and also the fans' perspective of him last year versus this year. I think there's a lot of different things in play on why I view Christian Hernandez as my comeback player of the year. The way he performed, and like if we're talking Bash, right? I brought up Bash earlier. He ended up tailing off a little bit towards the end of the year, But for most of this season, Christian Hernandez was leading the system in bash as far as my metric goes. He was leading the system. It helped that he was playing down in Myrtle Beach where it's impossible to hit, but he was putting up numbers down in Myrtle Beach. He was putting up good numbers into the year with a 126 bash, which is basically just behind like the big names that we know, behind the Ballesteros and Shaw and Caissie and Triantos. He's right there with those guys in terms of his performance on the field. Yet again this year, he ended up performing really well in terms of his base running, 44 stolen bases compared to eight caught stealings. That was something he did great last year. I thought the defense looked pretty decent at shortstop and at second base because he got quite a bit of run at second base this year as well. I don't know. I was just really impressed with Christian Hernandez, and I was a little worried about him last year. I was worried about what he looked like on the field last year. I know that we were grasping at all the positives, trying to find positives. Like, he looked pretty good defensively. Oh, he's running the bit. I had those things now as like an afterthought. Like the base running and defense is an afterthought because offensively he performed really, really well. Yeah, Christian Hernandez is definitely my comeback player of the year. Brian, I'll kick it to you for your pick next year.
Yeah, I'm going to go the injury route because I think that, there was a story in the Cubs system this year that is like, I don't know, a historical anomaly. And that's Ben Leeper coming back from his third Tommy John surgery and pitching as much as he did. I did not think he was going to get in 13 games this year. He, finishes the year with a 2.7 ERA in those 13 games, was really effective in August with Tennessee, making it back up to Double-A. Is Ben Leeper's whole season super impressive? No. Do I think that Ben Leeper's, probably on track to be a major league reliever for the Cubs? Probably not. But no matter what, like what he did this season, coming back from that, doing something that I believe only two other players have ever done, is just incredible stuff and deserves to be, sort of remembered. And I don't know. When I thought about this award, I just wanted to make sure to call out, what he did coming back from that, because I think the majority of players in his shoes would have just retired after he needed the surgery again. And he's just not built like that.
Literally a historic performance from him, regardless of any numbers that he put up. You know what I mean? Like that, it's wild that he was able to. I mean, I remember seeing Rich Biesterfeld take some photos of Ben Leeper down in Mesa of him like throwing, just not even pitching, not even throwing bullpens, just like throwing at all. And I was like, holy cow, like he's doing it. He's about to do this.
Yeah.
For him to come out to full season baseball it's downright insane. Honestly, it's incredible. So yeah, he deserves that award as well. I think that's a good route to go.
I want to toss out another name. He wouldn't have been my comeback player of the year. It just wouldn't have risen of meeting that, but I think he deserves a shout out, and that is Ed Howard. Sure. The promotion at the end of the season wasn't because he tore the cover off the ball, to skip Double-A or anything. It was a reward, and also an opportunity for a player who they knew had the right mentality. He's been dealt some really difficult situations, Ed has, and you never hear anything behind the scenes about people that are like, he just really has a great mentality to the whole situation. So I just want to give a shout out to Ed Howard. I hope he has a really good season next year.
All right, boys, let's get fun. We got the next award is the most fun player to watch. Who do you guys enjoy watching the most this season? That's not necessarily like who put up the best note. Like we're not saying like Johnny Long put up the best. He had the best OPS plus this season, so he's our pick. This is when you guys tuned in on a nightly basis or however you watched in terms of focus on pitchers or hitters or whatever you watched, watching highlights of guys that made their way onto social media. Who did you like watching the most? Who brought you the most joy when you were watching these guys take the field? Brian, I'll kick it to you first.
Yeah, so, I'm going to start with the caveat that the most fun thing that happened in the Cubs system this year was the Cam Smith home run streak. And as that was going, every day it became more ridiculous than the last. And so most fun week of the season belongs to Cam Smith. The most fun that I had watching, month to month was Jackson Wiggins, because Jackson Wiggins, you know, and this makes sense coming back from Tommy John, especially being a professional for the first time. Like, you don't know what you're going to get when you tune in for a Jackson Wiggins start. Like, there are Jackson Wiggins starts where, like, the first 2 innings, he looks like the best pitching prospect in baseball. And then the next inning, like, he doesn't know where his release point is anymore, and it's completely gone. There's outings where the change is his best pitch. There's outings where he like doesn't throw the changeup and he's like fastball slider. He is like, man, as somebody who just loves to watch pitching and sort of analyze pitching, like, I wrote up different reports of Wiggins starts on our 1060 West Discord this year, and like, there's no consistency between any of them. There's just like, the only thing is like, man, I hope this guy eats this offseason. That's like the only thing I wrote each time. But everything else is just like, it was just different, and he's fun that way. And you know, I think he'll be a more fun prospect when he gets consistency in his outcomes. But as a watch, he was pretty darn fun this year.
Dude, I remember watching. It was one of Wiggins' first starts this year in Myrtle Beach. It was pretty early on, and he had one outing where he threw one changeup. It was one changeup the entire night, and it was a filthy changeup to a lefty. Like, it was gross.
Yeah.
And I remember screenshotting it, and I was texting back and forth with Brendan Miller from CHGO, and I was like, "Yo, like, what's up with this pitch?" And he's like, "Does he throw that all the time?" And I was like, "No, literally once. Like, he threw it one time the entire night." And I hadn't really seen it the previous. It was like I hadn't seen it the previous outing at all. I was like, "What's up with this? Like, why is this happening?" That kind of explains his season, right? Where it's like, hey, like, you're doing something really good. Like, do more of that. Like, do that over and over again. And he like would choose not to throw the changeup, or like it was that way with other pitches as well. But like, I thought that was a great example of like, man, this is great. Like, do that all the time. And like, he didn't, but sometimes he did, and it was fun to watch. So yeah, Jackson Wiggins was fun. That's a good call. Zumach, what you got?
You know, I'm actually going to go with Wiggins as well, but for a very different reason. And I like to, one of the things I really, really like is to watch players. I'm going to kind of give it a little bit of a tie here, but I like to watch players that I feel like I really evaluated well, and then see their success. That always makes me feel pretty good about it. But then I also players that I evaluated not clearly not the same as the Cubs. And Jackson Wiggins was that guy. And this isn't to knock Jackson Wiggins, but as I was prepping for the draft in 2023, the only footage I had from him was in 2022. And because of the injury, and it wasn't good. I mean, the stuff was lights out, but I was having a very difficult time reconciling how the Cubs were kind of making this decision, and you know, got the tip off. It definitely wasn't an underslot, which we found out it was overslot later. So I kind of liked watching that and seeing what it looked like in pro ball, and seeing like what Bryan said. I mean, and Greg has said that he will show you a lot, but it was still really, really interesting. My other just maybe this wasn't the most fun player to watch, so I'm hurting the award, but my most fun part of the season was seeing James Triantos make his debut in AAA, like live in Omaha. That was just very, very cool. Got to say hi to the family. It was just a very rewarding moment. So most fun player though, I'm gonna go with Jackson just because it was always a surprise, and it was always interesting to see maybe different elements of my evaluation coming up at different times.
I was going to say, going with Jackson Wiggins and James Triantos both in this category is kind of a funny thing for you.
They're basically the same person, you know, like just mirror image. You
had the same evaluation for those guys too. So
I actually had it switched. So yeah.
All right, my pick here is actually Matt Shaw. I didn't give Matt Shaw the award for hitter of the year, so I'm going to give it to him here for most fun to watch. And part of that is because he performed really well offensively all season. But part of that is because one of you guys mentioned the Matt Shaw like profile. The plate is he kind of does it all, right? Like he hits for power. He has really good field of hits. He can hit to the opposite field really, really well. Watching that storyline throughout the year where he was like opposite field every single at bat to like starting to pull the ball and pulling the ball in the air a little bit more. That was a fun storyline to watch throughout the year. His defensive abilities were something that I was tuned into as much as I possibly could this year. And that is not the case typically with prospects. I'm not really locked into to their defensive prowess over at third base or wherever he's playing. And I was doing that for Matt Shaw this year. So that was kind of different. That was fun to follow. Him on the bases is really fun. Not only was he a 30 stolen base guy this year between AA and AAA, but he was also like just a really smart and aggressive base runner as well. We're not talking like Pete Crow Armstrong levels of aggressiveness, but like going first to third really, really well, scoring on a double from first base. Like I thought that he ran the bases really well, really high IQ player as well. So yeah, I think that Matt Shaw was just like, he's a dirtbag of a baseball player and just super fun to watch.
Also not like a swing that you see every day,
Yeah.
and like, he's such I don't know that aesthetically it's that pretty, but it's different, and that makes it fun.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of what he does is not exactly aesthetically pleasing. So
Yep.
that makes it fun. You're right. All right. Let's go ahead and go to. I mentioned earlier, guys, that we were most excited to watch this year. I wish I had those notes. I know that we mentioned Zaire Hope. I think that Jackson Wiggins might have been gotten a note last year in terms of the guys we were most excited to watch. But as we sit here today on Monday, the 23rd of September in 2024, who are you guys most excited to watch next year for the 2025 Cubs minor league season? Zumach, I'll let you lead off.
I'm going to go with a guy who came in with a lot of hype. He just had a tough year, had some injuries. But I think he's going to be very, very important to the Cubs over the next few years in the organization. That's Jefferson Rojas. I think that he entered the year very close. There was at least some conversations that he might even make the AA roster. And I mean, that would have been crazy by itself. Ultimately, again, like I said, dealt with some injuries, hard to hit in the Midwest League in early season. I still liked what I saw. And I think that next year is going to be a really, really big year for him. And I think it'd be very important for the organization.
Yeah, he was great early in the season too. It was just he just sort of ran out of steam, it felt like.
Yep.
Where do you think the assignment is next year for him, Zumach?
I think with a strong instructs, I think he actually could restart at AA. I think it'll be even better for him to do that. That's my guess. And maybe I'm just coming at it from the optimistic side. But with where the prospects are and where they'll have like shortstops and everybody kind of filtered in, I think he gets the aggressive promotion to AA. And also he gets really good marks for his work behind the scenes. So I don't think it's anything that they feel like he wouldn't be able to handle mentally. I don't like his struggles were physical. I don't think there was anything to do with mental issues this year.
Brian, who you got for most excited to watch next year?
Man, this is a cop-out answer, but the Myrtle Beach Pelicans offense next year, I'm really excited to watch. There are so many fun names, and I think this system is really going to need some turnover. All their best prospects are in AAA, and so when those guys are gone, this system needs the next tier, the next generation of guys to show up, and they could for all we know, they could basically all be in Myrtle Beach next year. It was a really fun Arizona Complex League season, and then they added some fun names in the draft. I mean, you're talking like Eli Lovich, who is a big draft gamble the Cubs have, should probably be in Myrtle Beach next year. Fascinated to see what that guy does with pro instruction. They could pick 6 different middle infielders, whether it's Derniche Valdez, Angel Cepeda, Ty Southerson, Ronnie Cruz. I mean, just throw a dart and you find a fascinating name. The catching should be really good. Jairo Diaz, Cole Mathis, the second round pick for the Cubs this year, should probably be there. It's just every spot on that roster as I map it out today looks so interesting to me. And so I know that if I look at my April 2025 self, he's going to be watching a lot of Pelicans games.
Yeah, which is different than this year, right? Like we lit off this season and we weren't really locked in on Myrtle Beach to begin the season, so that's
Right.
fun.
Yeah.
Fine. I'll take the obvious answer here. I'm going Cam Smith. I think that more than just, part of it is because he was the first round pick this year and he tore it up during his first taste of pro ball. So that's the obvious reason why, but also because I think that following up and watching how his first full season might parallel what we saw from Matt Shaw, not in terms of the way that their production looks, but do we see Cam Smith start next year in AA Tennessee and spend half the season there and then half the season in Iowa? Like maybe. Like I think it'll be fun to see how the Cubs work with him, and also just fun to see him just hit a whole bunch of home runs in Double-A. If I'm right here placing a bet on who the first player to hit a home run in the new Smoky Stadium is, Cam Smith's my guy. So I think that, I think Cam Smith is my answer. I want to give a little bit of love to Jackson Wiggins here too, because for the same reason why he was most fun to watch for you guys, he is going to be a guy that I'm really excited to watch in 2024, and to watch him go from someone who, like, he has all the stuff there, but watch him try to put it all together next year is going to be really, really fun. So, any other guys you want to call out? Okay. Let's move on to the biggest surprise of this year. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be a player. It can be a team, it can be a situation, it can be whatever. I'll lead off this one, actually, if you guys don't mind. I'll start off with my biggest surprise was the Tennessee Smokies season and kind of how they went about doing it, right? So we started off this season with all the prospects in Tennessee. Like, we were amped all last off season. We were talking about how awesome the Tennessee Smokies will be in 2024, and they were, right? All those prospects were incredibly fun. That was not a surprise. What was a surprise was them entering the second half of the season, losing Matt Shaw, losing Moises Ballesteros, losing James Triantos, losing Kevin Alcantara, losing all those guys, and still performing incredibly well, and even better in the second half. Yeah, even better in the second half of the season. That was not something I had on my bingo card. Them signing, and really the big thing is, we couldn't have possibly seen that happening, because a lot of the guys that end up contributing in the second half of the season for Tennessee were not even in the organization to begin, like, this season, right? There were a lot of minor league free agent signings that were brought in. That was really weird. That was a surprise in itself, how many guys the Cubs brought in from free agency during the season, and, like, older guys, and stuck them in Double-A Tennessee. That was strange. And even, like, the guys like Nico Zeglin that were lower in the levels of the system, like, that was all very strange. So for me, the answer for biggest surprise is basically the second half Tennessee Smokies. That was a surprise situation for me. So, Brian, what you got for biggest surprise?
I mean, that's a good answer. Antonio Santos became like my large, very adult son over the second half. But I'm going to go. You guys mentioned Christian Hernandez as your comeback player of the year. I'm going to put him here because the reason that he was your comeback player of the year is not at all the reason that I would have thought that his season would have jumped out this year. If you told me that Christian Hernandez is back on prospect radars this year, I would have bought that. I would have been like, oh, he found that power stroke. He got to like 20 home runs. He grew a little bit, like, strength wise. Nope. Like, Christian Hernandez is a prospect again because he has a strikeout rate under 20%. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, that he's walking 15% of the time. Like, he became a player that really didn't match any of the scouting reports about him as a teenager, as a player in Myrtle Beach last year. Like, I mean, that guy evolved as a baseball player. And, shouts to the hitting staff in Myrtle Beach. Shouts to Buddy Bailey for really sort of managing Christian. I think Buddy took that upon himself, is to really sort of be a voice in Christian's ear on being a professional. And he really was. I mean, he had such positive growth this year, and it just was not the shape that I thought his growth would come.
The second best walk rate in the system behind Christian Franklin is not something that I expected from Christian Hernandez this year. That's crazy.
Or
man.
Christian Franklin.
Yeah, well, yeah, actually. Yeah, exactly. Zumach, what you got for biggest surprise?
I don't know if this one's a cop-out, but I'm still shocked by the power display that we saw from Cam Smith. Like, it was crazy. Every day was a new surprise. I mean, it was just such an impressive showing. And I would say with where I saw Cam in Omaha, I don't know if he was playing through anything. I think it was just kind of towards the end of the season, the grind, playing for a championship. It looked very, very different. He clearly took a couple weeks off, got into pro ball. People have been asking, did they change his hitting stance? And really, like, there wasn't really much. I mean, there's minor stuff to get through the ball. He just looked awesome. He was hitting with authority, like, right away. relatively right away, and it was awesome to see.
You guys mentioned in Cam Smith and then walk rates from Christian Hernandez makes me think about like this isn't in the consideration of biggest surprise for me, but the walk rate that Matt Shaw had this year was kind of surprising, right? Like last year we saw him come into the full season ball and just hit and hit and hit, and he never took hardly any walks. Part of that was because he was hitting like crazy. He didn't need to take walks. But I wasn't expecting him to post a 12% walk rate this year at all. I expected him to have like below average walk rates. And in Tennessee, it was even higher than 12%. I don't have the splits in front of me, but like he was walking way more in Tennessee even. So like that was kind of surprising to me.
One of the things with Shaw really quick is that this is the first time that I think he was really, really hitting, and this is absolutely no disrespect to anybody that he's played with, but one of the first times that he's hitting where he doesn't have to be the sole focus of a lineup. I mean, there were times when he was at Maryland where I would watch him expand the zone, but it was like, well, that makes sense. Like him still reaching out to expand the zone to try to hit the ball across, opposite field was still a good move versus now I think he's more willing to take the walks in a more balanced lineup.
I agree. That's a really good point that I hadn't really considered. All right, you guys want to move on to the next one here?
Mm-hmm.
We've got the next award is Best MLB Debut Season, Best Chicago Cubs MLB Debut Season. So we're kind of careful with the wording on this one. Chicago Cubs MLB Debut Season. So that is not like Jordan Wicks or Miguel Amaya. If we're considering it, like he's not considered for this award. Actually, I think that the
Not
last
PCA.
year.
Even
Not PCA.
Yeah.
Like PCA could not win this. Actually, last year, I do remember this. Last year, I think that two of us had Miguel Amaya. I think Zumach, you and I had Miguel Amaya for this award, and Bryan, you had Jordan Wicks for this award, even with not much playing time for Jordan Wicks, but he was still deserving. So yeah, no PCA for best Chicago debut season. Bryan, I'll let you cheat a little bit by going first.
Yeah, I'm glad you changed the wording to Chicago debut season. Allows me to say Michael Busch. We as a prospect podcast, we didn't get to dig into Michael very much. A little bit after the trade, and then you're going back and you're watching videos from broadcasts that aren't familiar and reading, Dodgers prospect writers that have been talking about him for years. And I don't know. It became, I think as the season got closer and closer, I became less and less optimistic that Busch would do anything. I think I started to be like, oh, the Dodgers know everything. Like if they traded this guy, then he's not going to do well. And man, what an impressive season he had. I mean, a couple times this year, he had real big slump stretches and got punched in the mouth by Major League Pitching. And both times answered with really awesome streaks. Came out of the year looking so good and really locked down the position defensively. I mean, my God, he looked so uncomfortable his first 3 weeks in the majors. I have a friend who texts me about the Cubs all the time who was like, man, this guy is not a first baseman. And then like 2 months later, he was like, I think he's better than Rizzo at first base, And so it's, just an awesome year. And like, just a guy that understands how to adapt to the shape of a season. And those are the guys that end up having long big league careers, or the guys that can, figure things out and adjust back to pitchers. And he has that, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I think that Michael Busch, like over the course of the season, obviously, like he probably accumulated the most WAR in terms of guys that fit this category, and I think that he was also a kind of a surprise in terms of how well he played consistently throughout the year. But I'm gonna go with a different pick for my MLB debut season with the Cubs, and I'm gonna go with Porter Hodge for this category. And I think that like my pick is Hodge because he actually kind of fits a lot of these awards that we're handing out here tonight. Like he fits the award of like biggest surprise to a certain degree. He fits a big breakout. Like he fits a great MLB debut season. Like there's a whole lot going on with Porter Hodge. I thought he was great, man. Like I thought he was so good for him to go from AAA, where he was walking everybody and their mother, to get called up to the major leagues, like significantly trim back that walk rate, and also just perform incredibly well. Like he is the team's closer entering 2025. He is the Chicago Cubs closer entering 2025, as far as I'm concerned. And that was all because as he went on through this season, he just continued to get better and better and have more confidence. Like, watch him pitch now in Chicago to close out a game compared to like watching how he like went about himself on the mound when he was in South Bend. Like, he's always had the confidence, but like it's a different type of swagger up there on the mound for Porter Hodge, the reliever. So I didn't really have like him. Like, I thought he could be really good. I thought like his upside as a reliever was enormous when he was in the minors. But like my confidence level in him actually doing that was like not this high. He's been great. He was great this year. The way he broke out is just super impressive. I love Porter Hodge. I love him.
He proved to me that like we have no idea how to project who makes it as a reliever and who doesn't, because like so much of it is your personality and your temperament. And like Porter was a guy who didn't have feel in a lot of outings in the minors, but like something about his personality has him locking in. And like you see like Jack Neely in his major league debut, right? Like you can feel the nerves on the screen. Daniel Palencia has not been able to make it happen in the majors because you can see that he's nervous when he pitches in the major leagues versus when he pitches in AAA. Porter has never been nervous. And you know, it's like, it's about more than their stuff plus sometimes.
Yeah. And honestly, like with Porter Hodge, like he does have the stuff. You mentioning that like reminds me of, I know we've seen a lot of like up and downs in terms of his performance, but a guy who like really had no business being a good reliever for the amount of time that he's been a decent reliever in Chicago. Keegan Thompson, really like that conversion in my opinion from starter to reliever didn't make a ton of sense. Because Keegan Thompson was a guy who like he featured 6 pitches in the minor leagues. Like he was throwing 6 different like decent pitches and was like focused on like locking in on certain parts of the zone. And all of a sudden his mindset, like he was a guy like that temperament on the mound was huge for him. And like, yeah, it just, I guess my point there is like, you're spot on with like the mindset of a guy on the mound makes a huge difference once they make the majors, especially when converting from a starter to a reliever.
Got that dog in him.
Yeah.
Got that dog in him. No,
dog plus.
So yeah, weighted dog plus. Firm believer here that actually when I saw this first, I saw the award come up. I thought it was originally just best MLB debut. And I was like, well, this one's really hard to not pick Porter Hodge, who, if you go all the way back to May, came up. We didn't expect much and then struck out the side, came 1 pitch away from an immaculate inning. And that wasn't even his most impressive feat of the year because he closed out a combined no-hitter as well. Yeah. I mean, this guy answered so many questions. I'm so thankful that when we were talking about stuff in the offseason, we're like, boy, I wonder if the Cubs send one of Craig Breslow's favorite pitchers, you know, and we talked about Keegan, we talked about Porter and, you know, Michael Arias. Like, I wonder if they send, you know, one of Breslow's favorite pitchers over there to make a deal happen. I'm just so thankful that that didn't happen. It wasn't Porter Hodge because Porter was incredible. And while I still think the Cubs need to add an experienced closer, it's not because I don't believe in Porter. It's just because I think they got to go all in next year. But man, what he did this season was just like, it's just some nasty stuff. It's unbelievable.
You know who that Craig Breslow arm ended up being? Was Bailey Horn by way of Chicago White Sox, right? Like,
yeah.
Did Bailey Horn end the season with the Red Sox? I know he got there at some point. I don't know if he's still there or not, but
I believe he is.
Funny.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We got a couple different types. So Brian, I'll ask you. Do you want to dig into the superlatives next, or do you want to dig into like the weird wonky awards?
Let's go wonky awards.
Okay. All right. We got the first one is my personal favorite here. We're gonna dig into we're gonna hand out the award for the Sean Barry Award for the most talked about prospect on the podcast this year. So a little bit of background. I know I've told this on the show before, but the reason this came about was back in, oh man, now I don't know what year this was. Probably 2019, maybe? Probably 2019, I would say. When Jimmy Nelligan and I hosted the Growing Cubs show, we talked a lot on that show that season about Sean Barry, who put up downright ridiculous numbers during his time. I believe it was Eugene, and maybe it was up in South Bend, which was like low A at the time.
It's really how you built your brand.
It really was like we were the Sean Barry podcast, only for him to. I don't think he stuck around in the system to see the 2021 season. So
Sean just got married. Congrats to him.
shout out to Sean Barry for getting married. That's incredible. Sean Barry, you always have a near and dear place in my heart. Really appreciate what you gave us on this podcast. But yeah, I mean, there's guys that we talk about on the show. I'll let you guys. I don't know if you guys want to talk in generalities between like how the three of us talked about certain prospects, or like you guys specific. I'm going to talk about a guy specifically, obviously, but guys that we talked about that may not be top prospects, maybe they are, but we just talked a ton about a certain guy on the show. I'll lead off because it's pretty obvious for me. My pick is Frankie Scalzo Jr. The amount, like I think we talked about Frankie Scalzo Jr. every single week during that stretch in Tennessee where he was just his scoreless inning streak down in Tennessee, and had the chance to interview Frankie, posted on the YouTube channel during my trip over to Iowa. Frankie Scalzo Jr. is an absolute vibe, and I think that's like in addition to like his performance on the field, like the vibes that he gives off is the reason why I like to talk about Frankie Scalzo Jr. as much as I do on the show. He is clear cut for me the winner for the Sean Barry Award. Brian, you got next here.
Yeah, I don't think anybody in online baseball content creation got more out of one spring training appearance than I did in talking about Hunter Biggie having one inning in a game that I think had StatCast tracking in spring training. I think I mentioned that one game on this podcast like 5 times in talking about how he had taken a jump up a level in the winter. That's like delusional behavior by every standard by me. But you know what? I think I turned out to be right. And so, also credit to me. Biggie had a really nice season, obviously caught the interest of the Tampa Bay Rays, gets traded at the deadline, which then allowed me to bring up the spring training outing again in our next show after that trade. And so when I thought of this award, that came to mind because it was just a ridiculous performance by me on the mic this year.
All right, Zumach, what you got as far as your Sean Barry Award? Oh, are you frozen? All right.
Yeah, I am. I don't know. That was weird. I just can you hear me now?
Yep, you're back.
All right, that's weird. You both went out, but I think it was me. So sorry about that. I'm gonna assume you're kind of kicking it to me now. I'm gonna go with a guy that I feel like, at least on the episodes I was on, always came up. To the point that I think he even came up on a draft show one time that had absolutely nothing to do with it. Is Drew Gray. He came up all the time. And I'm still waiting for that Drew Gray breakout. Maybe we're seeing it at the end of the year. I don't know. But yeah, you can't have an episode that I'm on without at least mentioning Drew Gray once, if not a handful of times.
I think the common theme with all three of these guys, Frankie Scalzo Jr., Drew Gray, and Hunter Biggie, is that like the conversations that we had around these players were identical. Like not only did we bring them up a lot, but the conversations we had were identical every single time we brought them up. Like that's really bad podcasting because like people are like, oh, I'm tuning in for more information. It's like, no, you're getting the same conversation about Drew Gray. Like, is he going to break out? He might be breaking out. He might not. I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. The same conversation was had about these guys every single time we brought them up. That's good stuff. All right, let's go to the next award. We actually did hand out this award last year. We will have 2 new awards here, but let's go to one we handed out last year. This is the Javier Assad Award for the prospect that has never been ranked in a top 30, but could make an impact in Chicago one day. This is fun. I mean, I think these are just kind of like taking advantage of some deep cuts. But who do you guys got? Let's start with Zumach on who you got for the Javier Assad Award.
I'm now just wondering if I accidentally put him in my midseason. So I'm going to go with a guy who I, prior to this, did not have him in my midseasons, Arian Rodriguez. I think it's very possible that I did have him in my top 30, so maybe I kind of flopped on that one. But yeah, Arian Rodriguez, just liked what I saw. Still think he needs to kind of clean up some things, but I like the stuff. It's going to be fun to watch.
Brian, you got another pitcher?
Yeah, I just watched a couple outings that Luis Martinez Gomez had at the end of the year for Myrtle Beach, and they were pretty electric. And in those outings, Sam Wiederhaft talked about that he'd heard really good things about how LMG looked in Arizona, and it really came across on the screen. He's a 3-pitch guy with a really good pitcher body type. I think he's going to break out next year.
Zumach, what are your thoughts on LMG's fastball?
It go burr. Yeah, I was literally like, oh god, that's gonna be the thing you.
Yeah, you gotta sniff that
No, I'm gonna go way off with this Javier Assad award, because like Javi like never was there, right? And I think with both Arian Rodriguez and LMG, like those are like great picks, because I could see myself ranking both of those guys in a top 30 this offseason, or like I don't know, close to that, right? I'm going to go with a guy that probably will never touch a top 30 ranking, but it's probably much more of a long shot in terms of like him really like breaking out to the degree that Arian Rodriguez and LMG do. Nick Hull is my pick here. I really like Nick Hull in the bullpen, man. I really like him in the bullpen. He kind of showed me some stuff in the starting rotation as well, but like I was like, it's not going to work there. It's going to have to be in the bullpen. He went to Tennessee. He threw out of the bullpen. I liked what I saw. I think that like there's, now that he's older and in the bullpen in the upper levels of the minors, like there's no chance that he's going to reach a top 30 prospect. Like there's no shot. Whether it's in Chicago or somewhere else, I could absolutely see Nick Hull being a guy who's a middle reliever in the major leagues for a few years. Maybe not to the degree of success that we saw from Javier Assad, but Nick Hull's my pick here, because I think that there's something there as far as a major league contributor.
I like that.
All right. The first new award that we're handing out today is I tweeted out and got a response from, I believe David was the person who tweeted these back to me. If I'm getting that wrong, I deeply apologize. But he gave me the award, the idea for the I-80 Road Award. The I-80 Road Warrior Award for the player who persevered while riding the shuttle between Iowa and Chicago. This is something that we see every single year, right? Where there's especially relief pitchers that ride that shuttle between Des Moines and Chicago throughout the entire year. It's a little bit less now than we saw in previous years, where like there are limitations in terms of how many times you can send a guy back down to AAA. But who, in your guys' minds, I'll kick it to Bryan first, is a guy that kind of performed even though the circumstances were difficult for him going back and forth between Iowa and Chicago?
Yeah, I'll go quick. I'll go Keegan Thompson, a guy that never looks that great when he's in Iowa and always performs pretty darn good in Chicago. You get that guy in a big league stadium, and you're going to get the best version of him.
Yeah, I'm going to go with I'll kick it to you next year, Zumach. I'm going to butt in with Ethan Roberts here. I think his return from injury and then going to Arizona and then making an appearance in Tennessee, only to then go back and forth a couple different times between Iowa and Chicago, was and not throwing very often for big stretches of time, especially in Chicago. That's a tough circumstance. He's been really good over his past, I don't know, probably 6-7 outings or so in Chicago to end this season. So I think that he has persevered given some really unique circumstances for Ethan Roberts this year.
Yep, I'm also going to go Keegan, but I do want to really give a quick shout out. I'll give a shout out to this guy here in a second, but I will say that Keegan, he had an outing at one point where he got 7 pitches into an immaculate inning down in Omaha. Like, I mean, he was just, and you could feel the energy on the mound. Like he was pitching like you would have thought it was the playoffs in the MLB. Like he just was exuding that energy. The whole stadium could feel it. I don't know if this guy counts for this award. I just want to give a shout out to him. David Bodie. That man, like, just absolutely, like,
good call.
He deserved it. He's deserved it for a few years. He came up, didn't hear anything negative. He hit really well. He went back down when they needed him to, honestly, just dude deserves a ton of credit.
Yeah, there's no reason why we shouldn't think of David Bodie extremely fondly for the next however many years of our lives, right? Like what he did for this organization. Yeah, exactly. Totally. All right. The next new award is the Hey, Did You Lose My Number award for the player most deserving of a call-up that never got it. So you guys can interpret this whatever way you want, whether it's a minor leaguer to a different minor league affiliate or up to Chicago. I'll lead off by saying Bryce Windham. Bryce Windham is my pick here. Also, probably could have fit the Sean Barry Award. Honestly, talked a lot about Bryce Windham over the course of the season. Obviously, ended up retiring towards the tail end of this season. But man, oh man, given the circumstances, the questions at catcher in Chicago, the amount of veteran guys they went through, both in AAA and in the majors, Bryce Windham deserved a call up to Chicago this year. He absolutely did. And so I'm really convinced that the Cubs just lost his number in the process and was not able to call him up that way. So, Zumach, what you got?
It's Wyndham. I think there's just been a lot written about this already. There's a great article about him. Kudos to a really good career, Bryce. I think he's going to have a ton of success, but he should have gotten called up. I think that was, a misstep on the Cubs' part.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I mean, maybe we could say Owen Caissie because it looks like he's not going to be called up this year, but Bryce is the more fun answer because he's not playing baseball anymore, and it would have been just awesome to give him and his family that moment.
I'll throw one more name just very briefly in here. Moises Ballesteros. I don't think that he deserves a call up now. Like, I think it's fine letting him play out the year in Iowa, obviously. Well, I mean, the season's over, but I think it was fine letting him play the season to end the year in Iowa. But there was that hot stretch where the Cubs were really struggling with in terms of catchers. Miguel Amaya hadn't really taken off quite yet, and Ballesteros was riding this hot streak up to Iowa. Like, that would have been a time to call him up, and he never received that call. So I just want to put him in there to a certain degree. So, all right, guys, all we got left here is some superlatives, and we will probably churn through these pretty quickly. Believe it or not, even though we're spending an hour and a half talking about Cubs prospects, we do have lives outside of this. I know it's actually quite shocking. We'll run through. We got about, 8 or so of these superlatives, and we can run through pretty quick. Let's start off on the pitching side of things and talk about who has the best fastball, who had the best fastball in the system this year. Brian, I'll kick it to you first.
It's not the fastest, but I'm going to go with Brandon Birdsell because it acts like a cutter, which means that he throws essentially a 96-mile-per-hour cutter pretty often. His last outing in AAA to end the season, 19 swinging strikes against his fastball. I can easily go out on a limb and say that was the most that any Cubs prospect had with his fastball this year.
And was touching 97 throughout the season, which was brand new for him this year. So that's definitely a new thing. Zumach, what you got for best fastball?
Yeah, I had Birdsell this year. I just think the action on it's really impressive. Certainly down the stretch, there's some recency bias there, but
yeah, I think Birdsell's totally fair. I'll change it up and go with Jackson Wiggins here. I really like the fastball. I'll reference back my conversation I was having this year with Brendan Miller about Jackson Wiggins. And I know this looks kind of weird considering the lack of success that Bobby Miller has had this year in LA. But Brendan was saying that Jackson Wiggins' fastball reminds him quite a bit of Bobby Miller's fastball, and that's a pretty damn good fastball, regardless of results in 2024 for Bobby Miller. So I'll trust Brendan with the fastball comparisons there.
Honorable mention, JP Wheat.
Yes.
Ooh,
agreed.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that.
Really good.
All right, Brian, back to you for best breaking ball.
Jack Neely, and I don't care what JD and Boog say, it's a splitter, God damn it.
Zumach, what you got?
No, I was going Neely too. I think it's a really nasty pitch.
Yeah, I also have Jack Neely. When I was filling this out, I had forgotten that Jack Neely's slider existed. Brian reminded me that is the only answer here, I think, is Jack Neely's slider. So, best changeup in the organization this year, Brian?
Yeah, the Cubs have a lot of good changeups in the system right now. With Cole Franklin hurt, I don't know that they have like a great one. I am going to go with Tyler Schlafer. Down the end of the season, I think he really found it again. It was always his best pitch, and I watched a couple outings with Myrtle Beach at the end of the year where he really had it in full force.
Zumach?
Yeah, Schlafer's a really good call. I was going to go Nico Zeglin. Yeah. I don't know the age relative to the level and whether those guys have really seen a changeup that good. But yeah, I just, he's one of the more impressive ones.
Yeah, I think those are two really good picks. Will Sanders' changeup is flashed pretty good at times.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go with Will Sanders. Yeah. I think definitely less consistent with the changeup than Nico Zeglin. The breakout of Tyler Schlafer's changeup this year, or I guess not the breakout, the continued success of Tyler Schlafer's changeup was really impressive. I'll go with Will Sanders though. I think that it's flashed pretty good from time to time. The one I want to call out is Michael Arias, who has had a changeup that has been really impressive in past years. This
Yeah,
year didn't really get good results, but the shape I still like how it looks. I
I
don't know.
agree.
Maybe I'm just I'm my scouting hat isn't very good, but I like the way it looks. It just kind of gets hit around a lot. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of Michael Arias' changeup, but it's worth like being a part of this conversation because maybe it comes out next year. It looks the exact same and it's not getting hit around. And we're like, oh, like how can we not pick Michael Arias' changeup? So yeah, I just wanted to call him out there a little bit.
Yep.
All right, back to some position players here. Let's talk about the most power because there's quite a few good choices here. Brian, I'll keep kicking it to you first. Who's your pick for most power in the organization?
I want to say Andy Garriola's name out loud because he tied for the system lead in it this year, and I really like what he did. But Cam Smith showed very quickly the type of power we're dealing with, and it's a type of power that doesn't otherwise exist in the system.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really good answer, and I probably would go Cam Smith in general, but I'll kind of mix it up a little bit. I really thought that Matt Shaw showed all fields power.
Yeah.
Nick Cam did too, but like it just in a broader sense, and I was just really impressed that he was able to turn on it, and then of course combined his really good opposite field power. It's Big Daddy power in there. Maybe he won't get to him as much, but I'm impressed.
I want to throw out two names before I get to my pick that you guys have not mentioned. One is we know Owen Caissie puts up ridiculous exit velocity numbers. I'm not willing to put him here for most power because it just hasn't shown up in home run power consistently throughout the year. But worth pointing out, we know the exit velo numbers are there. Alfonso Rosario is also on my radar for this category. I think like his how young he is and his ability to put up some home run power is really impressive. My pick is actually Felix Stevens. When Felix Stevens makes contact with a fastball, it is unbelievable. He can't he
really
struggles
is.
a lot with sliders out of the zone and he strikes out a ton. And like I don't think he's a true in terms of like a true prospect. I don't think that he necessarily makes an MLB debut, but like Felix Stevens hitting a ball hard is one of the most fun things for me in this system. So I'll give him this award for most power. All right, from power to the hit tool. Brian, who has the best field to hit in the system based off their results this year?
Yeah, I mean, the person with the best hand-eye coordination and contact ability is James Triantos, but in understanding when to do damage on a pitch, when to go the other way, I think Matt Shaw understands the most about hitting of any player and then puts it on display on the field.
I mean, I'm gonna shout out James Torontos, but just in the interest of throwing another name out there, Moises Ballesteros.
Yeah.
Just impressive at bats.
Yeah, I originally had James Triantos down for here, and I think that like his ability to put bat on ball is clearly the best in the system.
Yes,
but this category is not best ability to put bat on ball; it's best field to hit, and I think that like I think he explained it perfectly, Brian. I think that Matt Shaw to me, when I like he's a professional hitter. Moises Ballesteros is as well. I think those two guys are the guys here. I'll go with Matt Shaw, just because it's. I think he combines it best. I think he's a perfect combination of like Moises Ballesteros and James Triantos in terms of this category. I think he hits just so well.
He's just a more experienced, refined hitter. He's damn good.
Yeah. Yep. Fastest runner in the organization, Brian.
You know, I don't think he's the fastest by speed, but James Triantos almost had 50 steals. I want to recognize him here because, you know, it doesn't matter how fast you are on a track. It matters how fast you are from first to second. And he won that one this year.
Yep. It's Triantos for me. I mean, again, it's not pure speed. I think it's just more impressive, but I mean, you almost get 50 steals. Like it's definitely a better stolen base score than I thought he would get.
Oh man, I think I'm gonna go with Brett Bateman here. Yeah, I think that I totally hear your James Triantos picks, and I think you're right. I want to see James Triantos in center field a little more often, so I can watch him like run after some balls in the gap. Because watching Brett Bateman go after some balls in the gap is like really fun. I think he's really fast. He didn't rack up almost 50 stolen bases like James Triantos did, but I think he's extraordinarily fast. All right. Speaking of going out and getting a ball in the outfield, we'll end the show with best defense. Last year we did infield defense, outfield defense. This year, I just want to know who is the best defender, no matter where they play in the system in your eyes, Brian.
I can't say PCA.
I don't think so. He's not a prospect.
Nah.
I mean, PCA is the answer. Like PCA is the best. But no.
All right, the Christian Olivo has really impressed me when I've been watching South Bend pitchers in the second half.
Yeah.
I like that. Both. I mean,
Yeah.
outfield and infield a little bit. So I like that. That's good.
That's good. PCA is going to factor into my question or my answer. Obviously, not that guy, but the guy I'm picking is somebody who, frankly, if you look at him, should not be that good out there, and it is Kevin Alcantara. Like any other organization, they'd be talking about him as, oh yeah, there's your center fielder of the future. Obviously, not any other organization, but a bunch of them. So yeah, Kevin Alcantara just doesn't look like he should be that good, and he's that good out there.
I think it was this show last year, Brian, you described Kevin Alcantara as like a future Gold Glove right fielder.
Mm-hmm.
My pick is the Jaguar. My pick is Kevin Alcantara. Wow. And I think that I'm not willing to say he's a future Gold Glove center fielder in the majors, but man, he is good out there. Like he is so good. The closing speed that he has on balls in the gap is outrageous. I think he is really, and the arm is really, he showed off the arm. I believe it was the last or second to last game with Iowa this year from center field, throwing out a runner at the plate. Kevin Alcantara is very good defense, like very good defensively. So, he's my pick here as well. So that's it. That's it, boys. We made our way through 20 awards that we handed out here today. We did it in a little less than an hour and a half. I chalked that up as a success. Anything else that you guys, Brian, you want to plug yourself, or is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
No, the winner for best website covering the Cubs farm system is Northside Bound. So shout out to you guys. You guys are the real MVPs.
Appreciate it. Zumach, what you got?
This is great. This is another good season. We got a lot of content still coming up. Northside Bound, jump in on the 1060 West Discord. It's going to be a long off season, but there's still going to be some good stuff to talk about. So with that, go Cubs.
Yeah, I'll frame this up by kind of laying out the offseason plans to a certain degree. It's all pretty fluid for what the offseason looks like, but I think I'm planning on sticking to what we've done in past years with the show. The offseason, we will turn to an every other week release date. Instead of being weekly, we're going to be every other week. Still planning to release on Tuesday mornings like we have done pretty consistently throughout this regular season, but we are going to every other week. So starting next, we will have no show next week, and then we'll be back the week after that, and so on and so forth. So the game plan for now, the next episode will be, I believe, with Brendan Miller. Actually, I think we're going to do a little bit of a healthy debate on when and how quickly prospects should be called up to Chicago, because I know that's something he's been preaching over there on CHGO quite a bit. But we'll have some player interviews. We'll have some different voices on the show over the offseason. Now, the offseason is a time to get some different voices and to get some interviews going. So expect some of that. We'll be covering the Arizona Fall League. We'll be covering the Rule 5 draft stuff. We'll be doing some fun things over the offseason too. So even though we're not talking about what the players are doing on a weekly basis, there's still plenty of coverage, especially when we're going every other week or so. So we'll have jam-packed shows throughout the offseason. Be sure to tune in. If we're handing an award for the best listener fan base, the listeners of the show are downright ridiculous. They're the best, just nerds in every single way, and I mean that with so much respect. That you guys are the biggest nerds I've ever seen. The fact that you guys tune in throughout this offseason, we have just such consistent listeners episode in and episode out. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hats off to you. We really appreciate you. Really appreciate all your support on the podcast platforms, over on YouTube as that channel's continued to grow, and over on social media as you guys interact with us on 1060 West and on Twitter and all that good stuff. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll be back in your ears in 2 short weeks. Take care, guys.